In Alberta, Canada, in present day, this is roughly what the railway map looks like. However, if you go back even 30 years, things have dramatically changed. For ease of discussion, we are going to start with central Alberta. This is what we have now, and the turning on and turning off ones are what was. Taking a closer look at the Edmonton area, you can see where the rail lines used to be. Let's get into some details and focus on the lower right portion of the map. Part of the Canadian Northern Railway, the Alberta Midland Railway formed in 1909, shown in yellow. That line went from Vegreville to Camrose through Stettler and Drumheller and then into Calgary. One of the first railways to arrive in Edmonton was the Calgary-Edmonton Corridor Connection. The Calgary-Edmonton Railway, formed in 1890, eventually spread west of Wetaskiwin and northeast of the city of Edmonton. Now let's look north of the city. Formed in 1911 is the Edmonton, Dunvegan, and British Columbia Railway, shown in yellow. Construction moved at a snail's pace on that line, after passing through Morinville, Westlock, Slave Lake, Grand Prairie, and eventually in 1930 it reached Dawson Creek, which was around the same time that the NAR, the Northern Alberta Railway, was formed, and took over operation of that line and several others. The green line coming off the ED and BC rail line is the Pemmican Valley Railway, built in 1926. In orange is the Edmonton and Slave Lake Railway, built in 1899 and was one of the first to go north. And next, in maroon, is the Alberta and Great Waterways Railway, built in 1914, traveling through St. Albert, reaching waterways via Lac La Biche in 1925. The Grand Trunk Pacific was not the only railway building across the north-central part of Alberta. The Canadian Northern Railway was another one. The Canadian Northern Western and the Canadian Northern Alberta Railway were also looking for a piece of that large pie. Building west out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, the Canadian Northern arrived in Edmonton in 1905, beating the Grand Trunk Pacific by a few years. By 1910, trains began running between Vegreville, Camrose, Stettler, and Drumheller. The branch line known as the Battle River Subdivision eventually connected to Calgary as well. The Battle River Sub passed through some beautiful farm countryside. An example is Meeting Creek. This line was abandoned in 1997 and the tracks were removed shortly thereafter. The Meeting Creek Railway Station, along with 2 grain elevators, have been preserved in this location. Also traveling west, the Grand Trunk Pacific was not to be outdone. Starting in Winnipeg as well, in 1903, arrived in Edmonton in 1909. Building west at a crazy fast rate, they arrived in Prince Rupert on the west coast in 1914. Between 1909 and 1914, they also constructed a railway between Tofield and Calgary that went through Camrose. Building south, the Grand Trunk Pacific ran into the Battle River Valley just south of Camrose. Crossing it meant building a bridge. And as we all know, railways are not shy of engineering marvels. They built the Duhamel wooden trestle. At nearly 4,000 feet long and 120 feet high, it was the longest railway wooden trestle built in the world. Ironically, this bridge was abandoned only 14 years later due to railway consolidation in the early 1920s. Speaking of consolidation, the railways in the 1910s and 20s struggled with financial issues, specifically the Grand Trunk Pacific and Canadian Northern. Between 1916 and 1919, both railways basically declared bankruptcy and were merged into what was being formed as the Canadian National Railway. Between Edmonton and Valemount, BC, both the Grand Trunk Pacific and the Canadian Northern rail lines ran almost parallel to each other all the way. In 1923, Canadian National started to consolidate both lines into one, often using the Grand Trunk Pacific's line over the Canadian Northern line due to the better construction quality. A section of the Highway 37 south of Lac St. Anne and quite a few sections of Highway 16, which is the Yellowhead Highway, follow the old rail bed from the CNOR Railway. Taking a closer look at the city of Edmonton itself, in 1930 the city's population was only about 75,000 people and had, as you can see, a fairly large streetcar system. In 1902, the Edmonton, Yukon and Pacific Railway built through the Mill Creek Ravine and through the river valley, eventually reaching an area west of Edmonton which is now Stony Plain. As the EY&P Railway was the first to build into Edmonton, this also is the first train to arrive. During the flood of 1915, the North Saskatchewan River rose more than 40 feet above normal. The Edmonton Yukon Pacific parked a train on the railway bridge to help prevent it from washing away. Although the tracks are long gone, the bridge still remains. A second was added and road traffic now uses them. In 1890, the Calgary-Edmonton Railway began construction from Calgary to Edmonton and arrived in Strathcona in 1892. Edmonton and Strathcona were two separate communities at that time. In January of 1904, the CPR signed a 999-year lease with the C&E Railway, and that remains in place even today. Crossing into Edmonton over the North Saskatchewan River was no easy feat. Construction on this huge bridge began in 1910. Completed in 1913, the high-level bridge still remains to this day, standing more than 160 feet above the river and at more than 2,550 feet long. The top of the bridge had two streetcar tracks on the outsides and freight rail line down the middle. And below that is a roadway and sidewalks for pedestrians. Moving back out to the surrounding areas of Edmonton, in 1929 the Northern Alberta Railway was created, taking over operations of the Edmonton, Dunvegan and British Columbia Railway, the Alberta and Great Waterways Railway, the Canadian Central Railway, and the Pembina Valley Railway. Something that many people probably don't know is that the NAR was half owned by Canadian Pacific Railway and Canadian National Railway. NAR steam locomotive number 73 is still alive and well at the Alberta Railway Museum just north of Edmonton. In 1981, Canadian National bought out Canadian Pacific's shares in the NAR, and at that point, that was when the railway landscape, as we knew it then, really started to change. With the introduction of the diesel locomotive in the 1960s, and major highways being built across the province, the need to have a grain elevator in every single community along the rail line became less and less necessary. Both Canadian National and Canadian Pacific decided that they needed to consolidate and reduce duplication along their lines. Between the 1930s and the 1970s, these lines disappeared. And by the early 2000s, this is all that we have left. I hope you enjoyed this look into the past. Please leave a like, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe to my channel for many more videos like this.